This Parsha podcast is dedicated in loving memory and Lilui Nishmas Mori Magid's, Michael ben Shmuel and Yehudit, whose yahrzeit falls out this week. May his soul be elevated in heaven. It's the extra special and uber rare Wednesday night recording of the Parsha podcast. You see, we typically record on Tuesday night. This week, it was a busy Tuesday night. It's Wednesday night. When I finish recording, I'm going to have to run to my computer to edit it, to make sure we can release it tonight. But guess what? Next week, Tuesday night, it's going to be Purim. And if things go as planned, I'm going to be in no shape to record on Tuesday evening. And I was thinking maybe we should just try that. Slurred Parsha podcast with all sorts of interesting little tangents. I don't know. I get overly gregarious on Purim and outgoing and very super chat. I think it's too risky. So please God, next week as well, we'll push it to Wednesday night. Maybe we'll have a little bit of a lingering hangover. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But 2 weeks in a row, please God, a Wednesday night Parsha podcast. And I have an important announcement and a request from y'all. You see, every year in the first quarter of the year, we have our annual fundraiser. So right now we're putting up the final touches on the Torch fundraiser 2026. And each year we have to do a different theme. So you get to the page on the online fundraiser and it says like the name of the theme and lots of graphics with that name. So I went back to the archive and I looked at 2020. It was Vote Torch. Like every donation was like a vote for Torch. And then 2021, it was Make the Torch Brighter. And then 2022 was Lift Up the Torch. And 2023 was Raise the Torch. And 2024 is Ignite the Torch. And just last year was Light Up the Torch. I'm thinking like it's just so easy when you have a name like Torch and there's so many different ways to describe the lighting of a fire, the waving of the fire, the brightness of the fire, the beacon of the fire, and so on. And that kind of represents what we try to do here. We have like this one center in Houston, Texas. We try to have this illumination that spans the world over. But we're trying to figure out what should be this year's theme. And we narrowed it down to 3 different candidates. We had Wave the Torch, Kindle the Torch, or Spark the Torch. So which one of these is catchier? And I can't decide. And I need your help. So I thought Wave the Torch was a bit too infantile. Wave the torch. We're doing like the wave by the game. I don't know. I don't like it. Wave the torch. Like, yeah, the torch is already lit. We're just trying to wave it. So we have 2 other options: to kindle the torch or kindle the torch, or spark the torch. And of the 2, I was leaning towards kindle the torch. And here's why. Kindle seems to me like it's more substantial. It has more gravitas. And also it sounds a bit more expensive. Like, how much does it cost to kindle a torch? That's more than it costs to spark the torch, right? A spark is just like one little shoot of fire and you could spark and that's enough. So I'm worried that psychologically someone will say, oh, this year's torch fundraising campaign is it's called Spark the Torch. Oh, all I need to do is just give a little spark. And I'm worried that psychologically I'm going to cause someone to give a smaller donation. And these are all the reasons why I prefer to say kindle a torch. But the truth is, and now that I'm thinking about it, maybe we should go with Spark the Torch. Because, yeah, a spark is just like a small little bit of fire that creates a big conflagration, a great beacon, but maybe that's what we should emphasize. Because after all, when you support Torch, there's enormous implications. The impact. When someone supports Torch, it's completely disproportionate to the input. A tiny spark creates a massive beacon of Torah that illuminates the entire world. So I really don't know what to do. I'm all confused. What should the tagline, the campaign name and theme of our fundraiser be in 2026? I still kind of prefer Kindle the Torch. What do you think? Send me an email. Rabbi Wolbe at gmail.com. You don't have to write a whole spiel. You don't have to give me a lot of details. You can send an email without any body in the text. Just say, kindle or spark. And maybe, but just maybe, we'll take that into account when we make our torch fundraiser in a couple of weeks. Stay tuned. We're going to do something to the torch. Hopefully we'll create the great illumination that will ensure the continuity and the vibrancy of torch in 2026. Stay tuned. Kindle the torch. Spark the torch. Wave the torch. I don't know. I don't know which one's better. I don't know. You tell me. RabbiWolbe@gmail.com. It's Parsha's Tetzaveh, and it's the second Parsha in a row whose subject matter is exclusively the tabernacle. Last week we learned about the building itself and many of the vessels. In this week's Parsha we read about first the oil for the menorah, then the designation of Aaron and his sons to be priests, and the vestments of the high priest and of the ordinary priests, and the process of the inauguration of the tabernacle, and the sacrifices for the week of inauguration, and the general sacrifices year-round. And at the end of the Parsha, we read about another vessel, namely the golden altar, also known as the incense altar, because the incense was burned atop this altar twice a day. That's the basic picture of the Parsha. Let's go piece by piece. The Parsha begins with the commandment to take olive oil, pure olive oil, without any sediments, in order to light the menorah each night. Ve'ata tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael, command the Israelites, they should take for you shemen zayis zach, pure, refined olive oil. If you want to extract the maximum amount of oil from an olive, you would crush it with a press, and all the liquid would ooze out, and you'd have lots of olive oil. But it would also come with lots of sediments. But the oil from menorah, it has to be crystal clear. It has to be sediment-free. Only the best of the best, the cleanest of the cleanest, the purest of the pure, the most refined of olive oil. Only such oil is eligible to be kindled on the menorah. That's the first verse of the Parsha. The second verse, we read about the placement of the menorah. It's in the sanctuary. It's on the other side of the curtain. There's a curtain that separates the holy from the holy of holies. So it's in the holy, not the holy of holies. And it's prepared by Aaron and his sons, and it's lit from night to morning. So this is the menorah and its oil. Next, we read about the designation of Aaron. Chapter 28, verse 1. Moshe is told to bring Aaron close. Aaron, your brother, his sons. You have to separate them from amongst the Israelites. Lechahanoli, they should be priests for me. Who are the priests? It's 5 people. It's Aaron and his 4 sons. Nadav and Avihu, Elazar, Isamar, the sons of Aaron. The entire population of priests is going to be only 5 people and their subsequent children. Now really, Moshe was supposed to be the priest, but he lost it. All the way at the beginning of the book of Exodus, Parshas Shemos, the burning bush. Go save the Israelites, go down to Egypt, go negotiate with Pharaoh. Moshe kept on objecting. He didn't want to take the responsibility placed upon him by God. And he kept on launching all sorts of objections as to why he should not do it. And the final objection was, Shlach no biad tishlach. Send Aaron instead. Moshe was worried. He was concerned about trampling over the feelings of his brother Aaron. Aaron would have to see his younger brother promoted over him. Moshe argued, just send Aaron instead. But that was a mistake. Because God tells Moshe, Aaron, he's not going to be upset that you're going to be promoted. He'll be happy. He'll be glad in his heart. V'ra'acha, he'll see you and your prominence. V'samach belibo, he'll be happy. He'll be glad in his heart. And for this mistake of not accepting the will of God, that's why Moshe was demoted. He was supposed to be promoted, or at least the promotion was withheld from him. He's an ordinary Levite, and Aaron, he's elevated to being the family of the priests. And from this point forward, it's only Aaron and his descendants. There's a very nice comment here in the Orach Chaim. Moshe is being commanded to appoint, to designate, to anoint his replacement. Aaron's going to take the job that was really allocated and designated for Moshe. And who has to do that designation? Moshe himself. It's like rubbing salt in Moshe's wounds. Not only are you going to lose your promotion, but you have to designate and appoint and anoint the replacement. And the Orach Chaim says something very interesting. Moshe made a mistake by rejecting the express will of God. God tells you to go, you go. Moshe needs to have a penitence, an atonement for his mistake. And the way he was forgiven, his demotion and his appointment of Aaron as his replacement, that's like a sacrifice, says the Orach Chaim, that will atone for his insolence at the burning bush. Very interesting. So you must designate Aaron and his sons, and then we read that you have to make holy vestments for Aaron, your brother, and for his children. Lechavod ulisifaras, for honor and for splendor. And instruct all the people who have wise hearts and are filled with the spirit of wisdom, they should make these garments for Aaron to sanctify him so that he can be a priest for me, so that he can serve me. And it lists the various special garments of the high priest. Now, as an aside, almost every year, this Parsha is read the week before Purim, and there's all sorts of hints to the Purim story in our Parsha. And many of the commentators find all sorts of references and hints towards the Purim story. And the Talmud tells us that Achashverosh, the king of Persia, he had the 180 days of festivals and festivities, and he wore the vestments of the high priest. He wore the bigdei kahuna, the garments of the high priest, during those 180 days of festivities. And the reason why is because he was convinced that the prophecy that the temple will be rebuilt 70 years after it was destroyed, that prophecy was proven false. And he wanted to celebrate, and he highlighted his supposed triumph over the temple by donning the garments of the high priest. Now, these garments are very powerful garments. The Talmud tells us that they provide atonement for the entire Jewish people. When the high priest would don these garments, that would provide atonement for a bevy of sins that the nation may have done. There's 8 garments, 8 different classes, categories of sins are atoned for by these garments. The tunic, that atones for the sins of murder, and the breeches for illicit behavior, and the head covering for haughtiness, and the sash for rogue thoughts, and the breastplate for corrupt judgment, and the ephod, the apron-like garment, that atones for sins of idolatry, and the robe that makes noise because it has the bells and the whistles, the pomegranates, and the gold bells on the bottom, that atones for sins of sound, of lashon hara, of evil talk. And the tzitz, the crown, the diadem, that is placed on the forehead of Aaron, and that atones for sins of the forehead, for azus metzach, for brazenness. Very interesting idea. We think of atonement. Well, that's you have to repent, and you have to regret what you did, and all the different steps needed to achieve full atonement and expiation. And the Talmud tells us that just the garments of the high priest, they provide atonement. And the commentaries tell us something very profound. What does it mean that clothes of the high priest, but in clothes, how could they provide atonement? So the Maral tells us, very interesting. There's 2 ways to gain atonement. You're a person, you made a mistake. Well, you regret that. I feel bad. I want to undo that. I want to repent. That's one way to kind of annul a misdeed. There's another way to annul a misdeed. To realize that that behavior was so beneath you, it was so unbecoming, unbefitting of you, you'll never do that again. You're so much bigger than that. These garments are worn by our representative. Our brother Aaron is wearing them. And these are garments of royalty. In fact, the Ramban has a whole essay where he goes through each one of the 8 garments and shows from verses in Scripture that they're garments of royalty. Aaron is wearing garments of royalty. Why? Because he's a king. And you know who else is a king? All of us. And when he wears those garments, he reminds us, the people, of our exalted status. We're princes of God. We're holy. We're lofty. We're so much higher than the petty mistakes we may have made. When someone does a sin, it's only because they think that's the appropriate thing to do. If you realize that you're a prince, you're a princess, you're elevated, you're exalted, you won't behave as a commoner does. And even though there are Jews who lived far away from the temple and would come very infrequently, maybe only 3 times a year during the pilgrimage, they would see that. And they would feel a connection and an affinity to the high priest. And they would know that this is something that I'm part of as well. I, too, am lofty and am exalted, am special, am beloved. And any mistakes I may have made was only because I failed to recognize that. There's a way to fix sin by realizing you're above it. It's beneath you. You're better than that. You're a prince. You're a princess. You come from royalty. You are royalty. You're not going to hang out with the lowlives, with the commoners, and you won't behave as they do. Very interesting insight, very powerful insight that could be relevant for us today as well. The aforementioned robe, on the bottom of it, it had bells and pomegranates that made noise. And the verse tells us, chapter 28, verse 35, that the robe would be upon Aaron when he did his service. V'nishma kolo, and his voice or his sound will be heard when he enters the sanctuary. Now, what does it mean that his voice and his sound will be heard? So there's a lesson in pedagogy over here. Aaron's the high priest, and there's no way for Aaron to be stealthy. He can't sneak in. He can't be surreptitious, because anytime he moves, there's 72 bells and whistles making noise. And therefore, no one would ever be unprepared for a meeting with the high priest. He's never going to walk in unannounced. People can always prepare for his arrival and make sure that they are ready for an encounter with the high priest. And that's a lesson for the high priest. Your voice, your sound should be heard. You don't want to see people doing something that they don't want to be seen by you doing. Because if someone is seen by their superior in a compromising manner, it's not healthy for the child, for the charge, for the pupil, for the disciple, for the underling. Very interesting idea. But there are other ideas. For example, one of the commentators says, the Chestuni, Aaron's on the move. Everyone knows Aaron's on the move. They hear the noise. The clinging and clanking of the pomegranates and bells. They know when he's about to enter the sanctuary. He's about to do the sacrifices. He's about to kindle the menorah. He's about to light the incense. So he's doing the service. What are you doing? You pray. You contribute your devotion. You have your kavanah. You try to do what you can to join that pipeline to heaven. And therefore, it's important for everyone to know exactly where Aaron's up to, what's he about to do, so they can do their part to join, to piggyback on Aaron's service. I saw two more amazing interpretations, both from Rabbeinu Bechaya. The first interpretation is that the verse is not even talking about the sound of the bells and the pomegranates. V'nishma kolo, his voice will be heard. It's referring not to the sound of the bells and pomegranates. It's referring to the prayer of Aaron. When Aaron does everything exactly as he's commanded to do. He's wearing the exact right garments with all the specifications, with all 72 of those bells and pomegranates. Then his voice, his prayer will be heard. And then he adds a second interpretation. That the voice, the sound is actually referring to the sound of the robe, to the ringing of the bells. Aaron's about to walk into the sanctuary. You're about to walk in to the chamber of the king. The proper behavior is that you don't enter a king's chamber unless you announce yourself, unless you proverbially knock on the door. You never enter suddenly. Someone who enters a king's chamber unannounced, it's a capital offense. How do we know that? From the Purim story. Esther tells Mordechai, chapter 4 of the book of Esther, I can't walk in unannounced. If I'm not summoned, it's a capital offense. And we know human kings are in some way resembling the kingdom of heaven. And therefore, just as Esther couldn't walk in without being invited in, so too, Aaron, as it were, cannot walk into the sanctuary without announcing himself. And I was thinking that maybe this is why we have the introductory parts of prayer. Prayer is the Amidah prayer, but we don't just jump into there. The morning blessings, the blessings of the Torah, and the Psukei de Zimra, the songs of praise, and the blessings of the Shema, and the after Shema prayers. There's a lot of prep work until you arrive at the king's chambers. Maybe this is all like us announcing ourselves. That's the proper conduct. But there's something fascinating that happens on Purim. The rest of the year, we cannot enter unannounced. We cannot just jump in. On Purim, what happened? Well, Esther, she came in unannounced. And if there's something in the kingdom over here that resembles the kingdom of heaven, that means that on this day, the power of the day is that you can enter the heavenly kingdom's doors, as it were, unannounced. The Talmud has a very memorable line. On Purim, whoever extends their hand, you must give them. So the way this is interpreted is that if someone asks for charity on Purim, you have to say yes, even if they're not deserving. The rest of the year, you have to say, I don't know, due diligence. Is it really for a good cause or not? How do I know? I have to vet you. On Purim, is they extend their hand. You have to grant their request. And the commentators all tell us, well, if this is the rule in Purim, it applies to God as well. You pray in Purim, and the answer must be yes. And here we see this idea. There's a protocol of prayer. You announce yourself. You gear up for it. On Purim, if we extend our hand out, even if we're not following the right protocol, and we're not doing what we need to do, and we don't announce ourselves, and we don't have those preliminary prayers, nevertheless, God responds in the affirmative. That's the garments of the high priest. And next, the Torah details the ceremonies needed to be done in the temple or in the tabernacle when it's ready to be inaugurated. So it details the sacrifices and the meal offerings and the anointment oil and the dressing of Aaron and his sons and the waving ceremonies and the baskets and the whole 7-day period of inauguration. This will only happen, of course, in the book of Leviticus, Vayikra. And then we read about the daily Tamid offerings, even though it's not related to the inauguration ceremonies. Nevertheless, it is listed over here. Right after we read about the special offerings done during the inauguration week, we read about the typical offerings done every day. And the Parsha ends with the other altar, the other Mizbeach, the incense altar. We have already read descriptions of many vessels hitherto. The ark, the menorah, the shulchan, the table, the other altar. There's the copper altar and the golden altar, the inner altar, the outer altar. The different ways to describe this, the breakdown of these two altars. There's one altar outside of the sanctuary, and it's made of copper. What's really wood, plated with copper. And upon there are sacrifices. That's the outer altar, the copper altar. And then there's the inner altar inside the sanctuary. And this was made of gold or wood plated with gold. And this is for incense. So it's called the incense altar. Okay. This is presented at the very end of the Parsha. Its dimensions and what it's made of, all that is found at the end of the Parsha. And we read that it was always used in conjunction with the menorah. Twice a day, the incense altar was used. Once in the morning and once at night. But that's not what the Torah tells us. The verse tells us that when Aaron prepared the candles for the menorah in the morning, he would offer the first batch of incense. That's the first installment of the day. And at night, when Aaron kindled those aforementioned lights of the menorah, that's when he did the second round of the incense. That's what the inner golden altar was used for. You cannot bring any other incense on that altar. And there's no other sacrifices that were done with it, with one exception. And this is the last verse of the Parsha. Once a year, on Yom Kippur, some of the sacrifices that the rest of the year, all sacrifices are offered on the outer altar. On Yom Kippur, some of the sacrifices are offered on the inner golden altar, which is typically reserved for incense. And with that, the Parsha ends. Why do we need two altars? You could have one altar, and you could process both the incense and sacrifices upon it, you would imagine. This is a very nice comment by the Kli Yakar. He tells us that one of them is for the body, one of them is for the soul. You see, when someone sins, God forbid, it causes corruption and corrosion to both body and soul. And both body and soul need an atonement, a rectification. And the copper altar, the outer altar, that atones for the influence that sin has on the body. And that's why animal sacrifices are offered on that altar, because the body is a person's animalistic side. But the person's body is not the only part that gets harmed and damaged and ruined and sullied with sin. The soul also needs atonement. And that's atoned for with the golden altar. And the only offering on the golden altar is incense, which it's all a smell. And we know smells are associated with the soul. In fact, the word for smell is reach, and the word for soul is, or at least one part of the soul is ruach. Smell is the domain of the soul. And that's why, he doesn't write this, but this is well known, every Shabbos the soul has the extra soul. There's a powered up soul. The neshama is there, the extra soul, and then you lose it when Shabbos departs. And that's why we appease the soul every Saturday night at the end of Shabbos with the smelling of the herbs, because that's the one way you can assuage and appease the soul. Very interesting. It's two altars for the two different parts of man, the body and the soul. The soul is golden, the body is copper. Now, all the commentaries observe that the Torah's description of the golden altar is totally out of place. It really should be in last week's Parsha. Last week's Parsha had all the other vessels in the sanctuary. We have the Ark and the Holy of Holies and the menorah and the table in the Holy, and the other altar that's outside of the Holy, that's outside of the sanctuary. And in this week's Parsha, we talk about the completion of the tabernacle. And we talk about the sacrifices done during the inauguration of the tabernacle, and even the sacrifices done on an ordinary day. And only then do you mention the golden altar, the incense altar. All the commentaries are puzzled by this placement. Why is it placed over here topically? And there's a very long comment in Orach Chaim and a very, very sharp Ramban on this question. But many of the commentators focus on this question. But I want to do something that we like to do here, year 10 of the Parsha podcast. Let's go a bit backstage. Our Parsha is about priests. Aaron's going to be designated. He'll have the special garments, and he'll light the menorah with the special oil. And we have all these inauguration ceremonies where Aaron and his sons are dressed and anointed and so on. Everything that we read about in our Parsha is about the priest. Aaron, the high priest, his 4 sons, and their descendants. I'll ask a very modern question. Why can't everyone be a priest? Why is it only Aaron and his sons are designated? Why can't standard issue Israelites, like myself, do any service in the temple, in the tabernacle? So, of course, this is not a new question. This was Korach's question. We'll read about Korach, Moshe's first cousin. He has a complaint. The entire assembly is holy. So why do you, Moshe and Aaron, why do you lord over the people? So we're not actually proposing what Korach proposed. But what's the logic behind it? The Holy of Holies, only one man can enter. One man from one family, from one tribe. The services in the tabernacle and the temple are done by one family. If you're from the tribe of Asher or one of the Joseph tribes or Reuven, or you're just out of luck. Today, everyone wants to be egalitarian. We have to have equality or equity. What's the reason why there was only one family that was selected? It's a wonderful question, and I saw for the first time this week a very nice essay by the Abarbanel on this question. And he gives a very logical answer. This is what he says. You think that to walk into the tabernacle or the temple to do service, it's just learning about dexterity and learning how to slaughter and catch the blood and sprinkle it and all these different sacrifices and offerings that we're doing. That's what it's about. You have to know all the secrets. You have to understand all godly matters. You have to have an insight into the ways of God. To properly do the service, not just the physical act. You can't just hire a robot to do it for you. Not just automate it. Look at some of those fancy robots. Optimus. He'll do the service. Of course not. This was intense service of God. They were trained for years to know exactly what everything represented and what exactly were the proper intentions and devotions needed to achieve the aims of the sacrifices. That's a very hard thing to do. And there are many things that are inhibiting a person from doing that, many blockages. To properly know how to be a priest, it demanded a ton of work. And people are busy. They have responsibilities. They have their familial responsibilities. To do this, you need to have seclusion and focus and effort. Only then can you understand the wisdom and the knowledge of God. Only then can you properly serve as a priest. So therefore, God commanded, there's only one family that's going to do this. They're going to invest all of their efforts here. They'll acquire perfection in godly matters. And they're going to be the priests, and they're going to serve God on behalf of the whole nation. And the whole nation is going to facilitate that. So priests, they have no other responsibilities. They're not busy with their job being an actuary or an engineer. They don't have to worry about tilling or harvesting or plowing or planting. They don't amass or procure possessions. They don't even own land. There's 24 different gifts that they're given by right, by their co-religionists. Everyone invests in the Kohanim, the priests, so they can have the time and the headspace and the peace of mind and the breadth of mind to do whatever it takes, to acquire whatever it takes to be a proper priest. And they do that on our behalf. We made sure they're sustained and they do all that work. That's the system. It's not feasible to have an entire nation of priests. One family, one branch of the Levites. And everyone else facilitates that. And they'll do the service of the temple on our behalf. So that's why not everyone could be priests. But why Aaron? So then he says, well, which family are you going to choose? You have to choose the worthiest family. Well, the worthiest tribe was Levi. And the worthiest family, there's two candidates. There's Moshe's family and Aaron's family. And Moshe's family, it's a bit checkered. Why? Because his wife, she comes from nobility, sure, but she comes from a convert and there's some idolatry. It's a bit of a checkered history. And therefore, Aaron, who is from nobility and his wife is from nobility, therefore, he's the right family to undertake this role. A very neat presentation from the Abarbanel. I want to suggest like an extension of this idea. Our Parsha ends with the Mizbeach, the altar. Which altar? There's two altars. No, the golden altar. Mizbeach Miktar Ketoris, the altar of incense. And it's made of gold, more precisely, wood plated with gold. And it was inside the sanctuary, not to be confused with the other altar, the much bigger altar, the one that's outside the sanctuary and made of copper, or more precisely wood, plated with copper. These are very different altars. They have the same name, but they're both called a mizbeach, both called an altar, but they're different. The outer altar was for sacrifices, and the inner altar, that's for ketoris, that's for incense. But let's examine these two altars carefully. I'll ask you a question about the nomenclature. So we have two altars, and they're different. One's used for sacrifices, one used for incense. In our Parsha, chapter 30, verse 1, we read about the altar of incense. Mizbeach Miktar Ketoris. It's called the altar of incense. The name is the function. V'asisa Mizbeach Miktar Ketoris. Make a mizbeach, make an altar that is used to burn incense. Well, if the altar that's used to burn incense is called the altar used to burn incense, what would the altar used to burn sacrifices be called? You would imagine it should be called the altar of sacrifices. But that's not what it's called. There's an inconsistency in the naming. This altar, the golden altar, it's used for incense, and that's its name. That's essential to what it is. But the outer altar, used for sacrifice, it's not part of the name. And it's not clear to us why. It's a little bit of a subtle question there. Now, not only is the golden altar used for incense, the verse stresses it's used exclusively for incense. Chapter 30, verse 9. Don't bring any ola on it. There's no ola on it. There's no mincha on it. There's no elevation offering. There's no meal offering. Venesech. Don't pour any libations on it. It stresses this is exclusively for incense. And that's, in fact, the name of this altar. What's the reason why this vessel specifically is given this sort of name? That's question number one. Here's another question. There are 3 vessels that have crowns around them. And these represent the 3 crowns of prominence of our people. We have the crown of Torah, and the crown of the monarchy, and the crown of the priesthood. And the ark, well, that represents Torah, and that's why the crown around the ark is the crown of Torah. And the table, well, that represents the monarchy, and therefore the crown around the table, the shulchan, That's the crown of the monarchy. And there's a third crown, the crown of the priesthood. And that's on the altar. But wait, which altar? There's two altars. There's two mizbechos. Is it on the outer altar or the inner altar? The one made of copper that's outside, or the one made of gold that's inside? The one that's outside, made of copper, used for sacrifices, or the one that's inside, made of gold, used for incense? Which one is it? So we read. You make it gold-plated. Ve'asisa lo zer zahav saviv. You make it with a crown around it. Rashi tells us this is a sign, this is a symbolism, lekeser kruhuna, to the crown of the priesthood. So we have two altars, and we have to make a crown on one of them, right? So why not make a crown on the outer altar? Why is this crown specifically on this altar? The inner one, the golden one, the incense one, and not on the outer one, the copper one, the one for sacrifices. Both altars are exclusively for the usage for the services, the domain of the priests. Why is the crown over here? Okay, now you may say, that's such a silly question. You're nitpicking. That's like the worst insult. You can't nitpick on a podcast, right? It's a podcast. You can't nitpick. So the nitpicker would say, or the response to this question would be, well, come on. The crown's going to be gold, right? The outer altar is made of copper. We're not going to make a copper crown. It's got to be in gold. And therefore, the inner one is made of gold, and you got to put it there. Let me ask you a different question. There are two vessels that could potentially represent the priesthood. You have the altar. Aaron would bring incense on the altar. But you also have the menorah. Aaron would kindle the menorah. So why not put the crown there? That's made of gold. Oh, nitpicker. Make the crown on the menorah. No, but it doesn't fit because it's not square. Come on. The menorah is not crown worthy? Isn't the menorah like the picture that we have of the high priestess kindling the menorah? Put the crown there. It's evident from the Torah. There's something about the altar, the incense altar, that epitomizes the priesthood more than the menorah does. And the question is why? I'll ask you another question. This one's an obvious question. No nitpicking here. If you read the description of the kindling of the incense, it's connected to the menorah. Chapter 30, verses 7 and 8. The ketores, the incense, is burned twice a day, once in the morning and once at night. But that's not what the verse tells us. The verse tells us that when Aaron prepares the menorah in the morning, then he lights the first installment of the ketores. And when he kindles the menorah at night, then he lights the second installment of ketores, of incense. It's a very precise connection here. The burning of the incense, both times, it's always connected to the menorah. In the morning, you prepare the menorah, and that's when you light the first installment. And at night, you kindle the menorah for the night, and then you light the second installment of ketores, of incense. What's the connection between kindling the menorah and the burning of the incense, and why does it have to be connected? So I want to suggest an idea. Forgive me, this sounds a bit cheesy. We don't believe in equality or equity. We believe in harmony. It's cheesy. I'm sticking with it, though. We're all different. But why are we different? Well, because the Almighty made us different. But why did the Almighty make us different? The answer is that we're all different because the Almighty wants different things of us. We each have a different role to play. We each have a different mission to fulfill. We each are required to fulfill a different role in the Almighty's world. Aaron did service in the temple. Why did Aaron merit that? Why did God choose him? That's a legitimate question. Well, obviously because he was the most fitting for it. That was the role that he was selected for. Well, what about everyone else? We're just extras, NPCs in Aaron's world? What about all the non-Aarons? Well, Aaron is selected for that role, but everyone else is selected for a different role. Well, Moshe had his role. And Hur, their nephew, had his role. And Joshua had his role. And Pinchas had his role. And none of you had their roles. Everyone has a role to do. It's not equality. Only Aaron walks into the Holy of Holies. It's not equity, it's harmony. Because everyone does their job. And when everyone does what's incumbent upon them, and everyone's together fulfilling what the mighty wants of each and every one of us, what's the result of that? Collectively, we're fulfilling the will of God. There's one part of the tabernacle that most represents this idea, and that's the Ketores, the incense. What's the incense? Well, it's a cocktail of 11 different spices and herbs that were mixed together, finely ground together. And each morning and each night, the priest, Aaron, he would place an installment of Ketores upon the golden altar. And it would create this amazing aroma. So beautiful, Talmud tells us that in the times of the temple, if you were a bride in Jerusalem, you wouldn't need any supplementary perfume. Why? Because everyone smelled amazing, because the aroma, the wafting aroma of the Ketores blanketed the entire environs with a beautiful smell. And, quite memorably, Talmud tells us that as far away as Jericho, the goats of Jericho would sneeze from the smell of the Ketores. Where did something so beautiful come from? It came from a mix. Each one of these spices and herbs on their own couldn't create that wondrous aroma of the cocktail. And at least one of those spices was positively rancid. The chelbana. It was effluvious on its own. But when you added it in at the exact right proportion, it contributed to the collective aroma of the incense at large. Each spice was different. Each herb is different. And each contributes something else. But when they all come together and each is contributing what they need to contribute, only then do you have this magical aroma. There are two vessels that represent Aaron. We have the menorah. Aaron lights the menorah. We have the altar. Aaron, he burns the incense. But these two are almost opposites. And there's a crown on one of them and not the other. What do you use to kindle the menorah? You have to find the most pure and refined olive oil. The purest of the pure, the most refined, the cleanest of the clean. Free of any scintilla of impurity or imperfection. This is like just the best of the best. And you could argue this represents Aaron perfectly. He's the best of the best. He's the most refined. But that does not represent the crown of the priesthood. The crown of the priesthood is found elsewhere. Let's get some definitions here. What exactly is priesthood? What's the definition of priesthood? A Kohen is a priest. What does it mean to be a Kohen, a priest? There's an amazing Rashi. It's a bit perhaps overlooked. Chapter 28, verse 3. It's, I think, the 5th verse of our Parsha. V'asu bigdei Aharon. They should make the garments of Aaron. Likadsho, to sanctify him. Lichahanoli, to make him a Kohen for me, to make him a priest for me. And Rashi defines the word priest. Velashon kehuna The term kihuna, priesthood, cherushu, it's service of God. Aaron is a priest. He's the ultimate priest. Why? Because he's the ultimate servant of God. He wants to serve God. He's a servant. He wants to do what God wants. How did Aaron earn the priesthood? What was the ultimate act of priesthood that Aaron did? The Torah tells us. Really, Moshe was supposed to be the priest, but Aaron earned it because he was more priestly than Moshe. Why? V'racha v'samach b'libo. When he witnessed Moshe, your younger brother. I always tell my kids when they fight, it's part of the job of the oldest sibling to taunt the little kids. Of course, it's not, but you have to just accept it. Aaron sees his younger brother reaching prominence. He's the representative of God and not Aaron. And Aaron's happy in his heart. He was glad in his heart. Why? Because Aaron is a servant of God. Just wants to bring about what God needs, as it were. So Moshe's the right person for the job. Aaron's so glad that the right person for the job has the job. What epitomizes service? What epitomizes the priesthood? It's service. And when my service and your service and their service and his service and her service and everyone's service, it comes together in the ultimate and unified service of God. One of the great Hasidic masters, he wrote a book called the Sfas Emes, who's the grand rabbi of what's I think today the largest Hasidic dynasty in the world. Gur, or Ger, different ways to pronounce it. And someone asked him, would you rather be the chief rabbi of this Hasidic dynasty or Abraham? What a question. What would you rather be? The Sfas Emes or Abraham? So the Sfas Emes says, it doesn't matter. As long as the mission of Abraham is fulfilled in the world and the mission of the Sfas Emes is fulfilled in the world, it doesn't matter who am I. That's service of God. And that's what Aaron did. That's why he's the ultimate servant of God. He is the ultimate priest. The inner golden altar is called the incense altar. It's called specifically the incense altar because that's what it represents. It represents everyone. All these different herbs and spices, all these different flavors be mixed up and coming together to create something really beautiful. And that's where you find the crown of the priesthood. The crown of service. Korach was wrong. We can't all be priests. But right before the sign of Revelation, it says, Vatem tihu li mamleches kohanim, you'll be a kingdom of priests. You can't be Aaron. But every person has a responsibility to find the priesthood that they can do, the service that they can do, the service that they must do, the spice that they can contribute, as it were, to the cocktail. Every Jew must engage in the service of God and must contribute exactly what the Almighty wants of him. So Aaron, every day, he lit the menorah. And what's the menorah? It's just one thing. It's like the opposite of the ketores. Ketores is lots of different ingredients come together. You deliberately bunch ingredients together. The menorah is the opposite. You start off with the olive and you have to remove all the stuff, just the purest of the pure. You separate just the best of the best. And Aaron did both. And you could argue, well, Aaron's the menorah. He's the best of the best. He's the purest of the pure. And the Torah tells us, every time, Aaron, you do something of the menorah, which you could say is a symbol of your most exalted state, the purest of the pure, do an act of priesthood as well. Do an act of service as well. Remember that every single member of this great nation can also be priestly in some way, in some domain. And only when everyone contributes what they need to contribute, the good, the bad, and the ugly, only then is the crown of priesthood present. The crown of priesthood is service, doing your responsibility. That's what it means to be a kingdom of priests. We must all find what role specifically we need to play. There are 11 ingredients in this cocktail. I would imagine there's at least 11 different roles that must come together to bring out this symphonic harmony. That's every person's service. What's your service of God? You too can and must do an act of priesthood. What a way to prepare for Purim. What a way to celebrate the Parsha podcast, Parsha's Tetzaveh. It's year 10 of the Parsha podcast. I thank you for listening. This was highly, highly enjoyable for me, as I hope it was for you as well. I'm speaking to you from the Torch Center in Houston, Texas. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Have a magnificent, terrific, productive rest of your week. And of course, a sensational and wonderful and restful and exhilarating Shabbos upcoming. And please, God, with help of the Almighty, we'll talk again next week. As always, my address is rabbiwalby@gmail.com. Nothing excites me as much as someone who has never sent me an email to send me a maiden exchange, rabbiwalby@gmail.com.